This is the first installment in my Terminally Online series, covering topics of online activism and internet intersectionality. Since their foundation, internet fan spaces have been wrought with exclusionary rhetoric and persecutory practices. One particularly bad website in this regard was the Japanese forum 2channel, referred to as 2chan, founded in 1999. As a male-dominated space online that was primarily meant for those in otaku culture, women were chased out or denigrated, preventing them from participating in conversations. In the year 2000, the word fujoshi was born. The word, literally meaning rotten girl, was used to degrade women in fan spaces for their interests. As explained by Midori Suzuki in her article, The Possibilities of Research on Fujoshi in Japan, quote, "The kanji characters for fujoshi are pronounced in the same way as a similar character compound that simply means woman, but the first character fu is substituted for a homonym fu." When the term emerged on 2chan, it was meant to distinguish otaku culture as the acceptable male majority from the fujoshi community, solely because they were women with countercultural interests. A woman could not be an otaku in these spaces, deemed as rotten for her interests. One of the primary factors leading to the segregation on 2chan was the core interest of many fujoshi at first being boys' love, also known as BL or bieru in Japan, or yaoi. So began the exclusion of women in fandom. However, the association between fujoshi and yaoi is antiquated and rooted in Western misinterpretations of the word and the culture surrounding it. LiveJournal user Willica4439 articulated this wonderfully in the thesis for her master's degree. Quote, "Homoerotic manga is especially popular, both in and outside of Japan, and in Japanese there's a plethora of terms to denote this genre. For example, shune, tambi, yaoi, BL. All have slightly different nuances, but refer to manga involving homosexual relationships between two men, which are written by women for a female demographic. The term yaoi is an anagram of yamanashi, ochinashi, iminashi, meaning no peak, no punchline, no meaning, which refers to the lack of a strong narrative structure in these works. In Japan, the term BL is preferred nowadays, but yaoi is still the generally accepted and understood denotation in English." She further explained her research to her otaku friends online in a LiveJournal post in 2012. Quote, "I also finally understand why there's so many names for yaoi and what the history of them is. This is how the association of yaoi equals homo manga for girls came to be, and this is also the point when the term came over to the Western fandom. But that only referred to doujinshi and manga with explicit content, so an overlapping term was needed to refer to all stories, manga, movies, and TV drama with the same theme and demographics. And that's finally where boys' love comes in. So the Western use of yaoi is actually an outdated term. Not a single English language source I read mentioned this, which I think it's pretty damned important to know if you're researching the origins of the fujoshi subculture and the etymology of their words." But because of women being separated from fandom and overall geek culture through these misunderstandings and mischaracterizations, it is estimated that around 2004, women in Japan, then followed by women in the US, began using fujoshi as a form of self-identification in an attempt to reclaim the word. While fujoshi did enjoy yaoi, they were also known for having obsessive interests that aligned with otaku culture in general. This is the premise of several josei manga series such as Princess Jellyfish, as josei series are written by women for women, giving the derogatory label fujoshi a positive connotation amongst women. Because of these hyperfixative behaviors, it is easy to draw a connection between fujoshi and autism, as there are English forums such as 4channel, also known as 4chan, and Reddit, with discussions about autistic women in fandom that have been called fujoshi. These discussions are linked to the creation of offshoot forums specifically for self-proclaimed fujoshi and autistic women, such as fujochan.org, threads on wrongplanet.net, and threads on the media board on lolcow.net, further cementing the association between autism and fujoshi. By creating a community within a community, it was easier for women to have open discussions about the label fujoshi and what it meant to them. Frequently, many who use fujoshi as a pejorative term operate under the assumption that they are straight women fetishizing gay men or the subject of their interest. This assumption ignores the experiences of many fujoshi, as in a thread that opened with users insulting fujoshi, Tumblr user Shiro Jasmine argues, quote, "I've noticed that there's this tendency to quickly assume that everybody that likes queer ships must be straight, which I find silly since personally, most people I know that actually do draw not straight content are very queer. It is annoying at best and insulting at worst to make such assumptions." The queerness inherent to fujoshi is hard to ignore. Whether queer means strange or different, indicating neurological disorders or othering, or association with the LGBT community, the word queer, and goes on to reject the notion that there is any fetishistic lens involved in the creation or reading of fujoshi media, particularly yaoi. Quote, "The internet is already facilitating discourse and textual circulation among fans in different countries, generating what I perceive to be a global counterpublic that is both subversive and fundamentally queer in nature. This queerness both demonstrates that the readership is not coherent, monolithic, or singular, and opens a discursive space for multiple and fluid readings of boy love manga to be circulated and shared among an intimate network of strangers around the world." Wood goes on to purport that fujoshi interests in media speak to, quote, "not only possible lesbian desires and fantasies, but also other queer, transgender, and transsexual ones," which not only aligns with Shiro Jasmine's experiences as a queer fujoshi, but speaks to Jordan Jack's research on autism and gender in the aptly titled Autism and Gender, From Refrigerator Mothers to Computer Geeks. Jack introduces the concept of gender as disidentification in the section Inventing Gender Identification and Disidentification of Chapter 5, Inventing Gender, Neurodiverse Characters. Quote, "Autistic individuals may understand gender as a sort of disidentification. From this perspective, one relates one's own sense of gender identity to observations of available gender roles or performances and finds a lack of coherence. Such a perspective squares with the Burkean notion that identity is not individual. A man identifies himself with all sorts of manifestations beyond himself. Gender provides one of these manifestations." The rest of the chapter expounds on this, but is perfectly summarized in the book's conclusion. Quote, "Most often, both scientific and popular rhetorics about autism enforce a gender binary, in which stereotypical gender roles are enforced, represented, or assigned to individuals. Ironically, though, many autistic individuals write about their own understandings of gender as complex, multiple, or ambiguous, a finding that draws attention to the rhetorical construction of the binary gender system itself. The disidentification process in fujoshi media, with men typically depicted as androgynous beings, and the Wayne's idea of a global counterpublic, and the process of reclaiming the word. Interestingly, the stock character fujoshi is represented by women not performing traditional femininity. Hell, even saying the word fujoshi probably conjures up the image of a girl with messy hair, typically braided or in a low ponytail, in ill-fitting clothes with glasses, maybe acne, who is sweaty or anxious in some way. This caricature plays up the rotten aspect of the girl, making her ugly for having interests, although these interests are typically considered acceptable if held by men. Not properly performing femininity and being rotten is considered a bad thing by misogynists. But this disidentification from womanhood is exactly why women choose to self-identify with the term. Of course, fujoshi were not limited to just being straight women, as the term was originally meant to imply, but people at intersections of identity, typically disabled and queer individuals. The process of othering fujoshi created a feminist counterculture that already operated in the real lives divorced from gender and in minority groups. There's a thread on Tumblr that sums up the issue of being anti-fujoshi and misunderstanding the term. User Who Gives a Ship replies to an anti-fujoshi thread with, quote, "Yes, fujoshi do have a bad reputation in certain Anglophone circles, but a lot of that hate is just unconscious misogyny and homophobia. The Western world is historically prejudiced against women having an active sexuality. There has certainly been bad behavior in the past, but Fujoshi communities themselves have worked to eliminate it and actively correct any younger Fujoshi who might not yet understand proper etiquette. English-speaking people who self-identify as Fujoshi generally fit the Japanese usage, just as female or female-aligned fans of BL and MM shipping. Any bad behavior is the fault of the individual. Saying all Fujoshi are evil fetishizers is like saying all horror movie fans are racist. Maybe some of them are, but it isn't inherent to the group. However, there is currently a very vocal anti-Fujoshi movement, especially on Tumblr. It's really about controlling what fictional media women, and sometimes AFAB people of all genders, are allowed to be aroused by. That's where the use of sinning in Western fandom comes from. The fictional relationship itself isn't sin, it's the fact that a woman is reading something sexually explicit, which is very taboo in a lot of Western countries. So long story short, Fujoshi are just female BL fans, and that's the same outside of Japan too. There's nothing wrong with supporting Fujoshi or even being one. The only reason the word gets hate is because some Westerners decided that they get to redefine a Japanese term and use it as a sexist insult. Adding on to this, Tumblr famous user Rotten Boys Club were blocked with, quote, "Everything that Who Gives a Ship said is true. I have various sources on the origins of Fujoshi as a term and how it's reclaimed in its current usage. The whole Fujoshis are evil fetishizers thing started with Western radfems who were trying to make Fujoshi into a slur against gay trans men by using mistranslations of the Japanese definition on purpose in order to confuse Westerners. The thing is that in Japan, of course, this doesn't make much sense, as gender and sexuality are much more linked than in Western circles, and the most common slurs for people who are LGBT are directed towards assumed trans, non-binary, and GNC people." He then goes on to explain the various Japanese slurs directed at these groups. There's also the fact that radical feminism didn't really take off in Japan apart from the occasional anti-porn type, but a lot of feminists in Japan, such as the artist Megumi Igarashi, are actually fighting against the current obscenity laws and for the decensorship of genitalia in media and the arts. So this ultimately is the current Fujoshi mission, destigmatizing queer interests in nudity and art while continuing to partake in their interests, which are not tied to yaoi as the Western misinterpretation of the word would suggest. Now, over 20 years after the creation of the word, there are people all over the world identifying with the word Fujoshi, even creating male Fudanshi and gender non-conforming Fujin equivalents to further foster equity in fandom and within the community, while pushing back against patriarchal ideas of femininity and radfem rhetoric. With discourse online still centering on the semantics of whether or not Fujoshi are fetishizing gay men, many who identify as Fujoshi continue to hold strong in their argument that to be Fujoshi is to be the other, and that otherness has created an online feminist movement that still pushes for equity and visibility in fandom spaces today. I want to thank every Fujoshi who has ever posted about their experiences for being open online about their identity and their research, as well as those who took it to academic settings and published their lived experiences in poignant articles. I especially want to thank Willika Blom for her research from over a decade ago and for providing me access to her thesis and information on the resources she utilized. This paper gave me so many resources, both in English and Japanese, and I can only find it appropriate to express my gratitude. And, of course, thank you to everyone who gave this video a chance. I really hope to further pursue Fujoshi studies as a part of my professional career and would love to proctor a survey to continue my research into the correlation between autism and Fujoshi. This video acts as merely an introduction to my work, so it was really exciting to put together. It's difficult being a writer nowadays, as everyone thinks they can write well or that they have something to say, and copywriting as an industry is either AI babysitting or spewing out listicles on top things that you need to buy as a consumer, making my future as a writer honestly dreadful. I would love to continue my rhetorical work and hope that everyone will want to stick around for my future. I'd also like to ask any viewers to donate whatever they can to Operation Olive Branch, which I've linked in the description. Their grassroots approach to aid has helped so many Palestinian families in need, and if even a fraction of people donated $1 to $5, many families will reach their goals and be able to escape the horrors that they should have never endured. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.